searching for answers.
Here are today's top stories.
Been over 24 hours.
And the local news.
What we see are a lot of things that are going on the earth.
This is Art of Heaven News Talk.
Yes, it is. Broadcasting live from WHPC Studios in Garden City, New York. This is Art of Heaven News Talk, where we deliver global, national, and local news through the lens of faith, oftentimes comparing stories to Scripture. I'm your host, Johnny Brummett, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Mark Russick of the Russick Outlook YouTube channel and podcast, media personality Christina Orlando, and pastor and theologian Nathan Gassaway. If you want to join the conversation, lines are open at 516-572-7440. It's 516-572-7440. How is everybody?
Woo.
It's all good. Sunshine's out. Weather's changing.
Spring is here.
Good.
So let's jump right into the biggest, most breathtaking news in the world. We got a missile fight going on in the Middle East. And let me just recap that real quick. So it looks like this whole thing started because Iran's accusing Israel of bombing the embassy in Syria, the Iranian embassy in Syria, right? Israel's not claiming responsibility for it, but it is what it is. So they said, we're going to retaliate. And I think they gave them about 10 days warning. And then they sent over 350 missiles and drones this past week. And just about everyone was knocked out of the sky by a collaboration of United States, France, I believe, Jordan, and Israel.
And Saudi Arabia.
And Saudi Arabia too, I guess. So now the most recent news, and then you can take this story over, Mark. Israel hit them back.
They did, and I would say this really goes back to October 7th. So this really stems from the attack from Gaza into Israel. Basically, everybody knows that Iran is behind a lot of this, facilitates the funding to Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, other proxies, if you will, the Houthis, and you have others in Syria as well. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, it's a military post next to the embassy in Damascus for Iran, and the Israeli intelligence had known that some of the leaders the orchestrators of a lot of the military actions that are going on in Israel were there. They had the intelligence. They bombed it. It was very precision.
They took out a leader.
They took out
Iranian leader.
They
right?
took out their number one Iranian leader, as well as I think 5 or 6 others. But it was a very precise strike. Iran, in turn, just responded, as many people know if you're listening, 5-6 days ago. 300 plus missiles, as you described, but incredibly, everything, 99% of the missiles were taken out from joint coordination with the nations that you mentioned, principally the United States and England. France had some help, but also of particular interest, you had the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan leading in helping this. So here you had Arabs helping Israel, which that in of itself is pretty significant.
Yeah, Jordan said they knocked out missiles because they were flying over their own land, right?
Right, but even 2 years ago, if you had missiles strike going over Jordanian skies into Israel, they would have let it go.
Yeah.
So, this shows, and a lot of this ties to the Sunni-Shia difference. Go ahead.
You said that this goes back to October 7th, right?
Yep.
But I think it might go back like a lot longer than that.
You go back thousands of years.
Can you help us out, Nathan?
Well, I mean, you've got hostility in the land for a long time. These are both, in some sense, descendants of Abraham. Some would take it Jacob and Esau as you've got some problems between two brothers.
Let's stop right there. Exactly. Are they brothers? Are these two nations, groups of nations, essentially brothers?
Well, there's a lot of commonality. Semitic languages, Semitic people. Now we get this idea of Semitic from the one of Noah's sons, Shemitic. Really, if you look at Arabic and Hebrew, these are both considered Semitic languages. They have a lot of things in common. If you can read a little Hebrew, you may not be able to read the Arabic, but they share words like take mot, which means death in both of the languages. there's a lot of common ground, and yet they couldn't be further apart, it seems.
But you said Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, Jacob and Esau, you'll remember that these twins came out, one right after the other. Jacob, the supplanter, he grabbed the planter, the heel of his brother, and which was kind of symbolic of trying to taking the blessing. And he was his name also means trickster, and he was a trickster. He paid a price for that trickery. It got played on him. You do reap what you sow. But in the end, it seems like Esau gave up his birthright, probably for a bowl of soup. I may be oversimplifying it, but it's been costly. There's been tension since then. But now I want to caution that, remember, Esau was also blessed by God, the God of Abraham, and we don't want to just put people in silos very easily, but it is kind of ironic and striking that people that descended from ostensibly the same family are so at war with one another.
So in the Bible it says that you will hear wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. For these things must happen, but the end is still to come. What does that mean? Like, there's always going to be wars.
That's really what Jesus was alluding to when his disciples and others asked him, what will be the signs of the end? What will be the signs of your return? And he goes through that as you did, wars and rumors of wars and much more. But what the important part there is, when you see these signs, Jesus said, look up, your redemption draws near. And this is where I think a lot of the churches around that are looking at the potential prophetic implications of what we see in the Middle East and Jerusalem and Israel is, are we drawing near to the end of days? Because, 27% of the Bible is prophecy, and 60% of that has been fulfilled, so there's still a good portion to be open. And so much of it centers around Israel and wars and rumors of wars and so forth.
Oh, I just want to get some clarity, though, on this. Is Jacob and Esau, let's go back to that for a minute. This is a story that's going back a long time. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that these nations, though, are brothers back to that story in the Bible?
Yeah, it's not quite that simple, because there's a lot of intermixing with groups. I mean, people were under Babylonian conquest. You got Babylonian kinds of things going on, Assyrian and the like. But there are relatives in many ways. They share a lot of customs. These are Semitic people. And it's not so easy to tag every particular nation or individual within the nation and say, oh, yeah, there's a lot of intermixing. But in many ways, they are all children of Abraham.
I mean, I just want to make the world understand, because the whole world is caught up in this right now.
Right. And that's, to Nathan's point, that's where you got the name for Abraham Accords, because they were trying to find the commonality between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And Abraham is relevant to all three religions.
Yeah, I think for many of us here in America, we're watching these things happen and we feel pretty powerless and helpless. And we just want to see the people, the innocent people, being able to survive and thrive where they live. So I know that prayer is essential for us as Christians as we see these things happening. And it's very easy for me to want to pick a side, but I know that there's just innocent people, beautiful families there that have the right to peace. So that's where I really need to just continue to pray.
And peace in the Middle East has been something people have been striving for eons.
Yes.
And probably it won't ultimately happen until Jesus returns, yep. But we still should strive for it, and we don't want to see innocent people harmed. The question is, how do we bring about peace? Well, I don't think it's so simple. I do think that sometimes we can even be, our vision can be clouded because we see the physical painted so loudly and so large, but there are spiritual things going on behind that.
Yes.
For the Christian, we need to recognize that it's not simply a matter of wrestling against flesh and blood, but there are these spiritual forces, dark powers, that we need to use spiritual weapons to defeat spiritual enemies. And I think we don't avail ourselves enough, Christina, as you pointed out, of this power of prayer.
Absolutely. And, you go back to October 7th, and I don't want to go through the heinous and just ugly crimes that were committed, but that was clearly spiritual. It was demonic. It was evil, cutting off body parts and whatnot. And then the flip side of that is there's reports that are coming out from the other night where they intercepted almost 100% of the missiles, where there are scientists saying this is impossible. Something else was going on
Wow.
to prevent the land. And these are Jewish people who believe God was helping them or angels were helping them.
Ooh.
I mean, what would you say to people that are so caught up in this, from the protests in New York City? We got Columbia University
Yes.
now. Like, do people not recognize that this is biblical?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would depend on the person. Some people aren't believers in anything that are involved in these protests. Others come from a different faith slant where they might think that, well, actually, this is exactly what's supposed to happen. You know, they may not be believers in peace now or peace ever, and who knows? I can't really be the thought police, but I can tell you that there's a lot of stirring going on without a lot of information.
You're listening to Art of Heaven News Talk on 90.3 WHPC. If you want to join this conversation, the number is 516-572-7440. Now, I got a question. I want to propose a question to each of you. We'll start with Christina and then Nathan.
All right.
All right. So you brought up, Nathan, that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. With that being said, what would you do if somebody kidnapped your loved one and they're holding a knife to them? And you know, all right, our enemies are not of flesh and blood. Are you still going to pick up and lay that person down with a weapon like a gun?
Karate kick? I'm just kidding. I mean, it's so easy to say, from not being in that situation, just talk to the person and things. But I know that once you're in that situation, it's a lot of fight or flight. But I really do hope that when I'm in that situation that I can just call upon Jesus in that moment to say, Jesus, help me navigate this situation. I heard recently, locally at our church, we heard a story of a woman who was robbed. And the first thing that she said was, Jesus, help me. And she asked the robber, do you know Jesus? And he said, yes. And then he left the house.
And this was a person that entered her home to rob her.
And the first thing that she said, she could have swung something at him. But she said, do you know Jesus? And he said he did, and he left. So when I think of things like that, I just hope that I would have the boldness to do something maybe differently than what would be expected.
Wow, great answer. You're gonna rely on your faith.
Yeah.
Look at this situation and be like, God, make a way out in faith.
Yeah, and to Christina's point, I mean, Jesus, he says, those who live by the sword die by the sword. When his disciples wanted to call fire down from heaven, he says, you don't know what spirit you're of. We're supposed to render good for evil, not evil for evil. You can make that case, and I think that's right. I think, we always say, well, what would Jesus do? I don't know that Jesus would strike someone dead. On the other hand, is it ever appropriate for someone to defend themselves against an attack? Now, if you're a pacifist, you'll say no, and you do. And I do think prayer should be our first resource, not our last resort. I do think that's an important thing. So I would hope that you call on the name of the Lord, and then the Lord intervenes. But what would happen? I don't know if someone broke in and threatened my kids. What would happen? I'd like to think I would, depend on the Lord. But who knows? And this is why one thing we need to make clear is that these kinds of evils of attacking, aggression, thievery, and the like, they affect everyone. And my hope would be that Christians would turn to the Lord first. We'll just say it that way.
What if you're a police officer?
Well, then you might make the case that, based on Romans 13, that God has endowed the rulers, the authorities, with powers to use the sword. Now, people can debate that, pacifists too, but insofar as if you make the case from Romans 13, I suppose you could say there is such thing as a just government that can execute justice. But again, I tend to lean more toward Jesus. I don't want to live by the sword nor die by the sword. So, yeah.
I just want to segue a little bit, because I'm sure we're nearing the end of this segment, but I think it's important, kind of getting back to the retaliation from Israel. Israel let Iran know they can get them at any time, because that bomb was very centered, or bombs were very centered in that location. Whereas Iran was trying to get into Israeli airspace, 99% of them were knocked out.
Great point. And you're talking about the very last piece to this story.
Yes.
Israel sent one missile, was it?
No, it was more than that, but they were unmanned drones, but several. And, it wound up doing a lot of damage to a military base very near Natanz, which is one of their nuclear facilities, a couple hundred miles from Tehran. And they were on heightened alert, Iran, because of what they knew they did a few days earlier. My point is, Israel demonstrated, with the cooperation of the other nations we mentioned, that they have a superior military force and they can strike Iran at any time that they want. So I think you're going to see Iran just back off a little bit. But, as most know, this story is not over.
Yeah, this is...
And it's a very, very volatile situation, kind of getting back to your point, Christina, about prayer. We need to be praying for that part of the world, the people there, the innocent people, the families, the children, and pastors. There's pastors and Christian churches in Gaza right now who desperately need help.
Well, we gotta hold our breath for this one, because this is real. This is getting real. It's a big scale thing. Israel's over there just fighting constantly, fighting for their lives. It's like Israel's just taking on 10 different enemies at once. But that's how I'm looking at it. But on to our next story here at Art of Heaven News Talk. There is a story that personally I have to share. I brought this story into the show today because I'm fed up with these calls I'm getting lately from these scammers, is what it is. They can't even do their job right. They call me and they want information. They say they're going to give me this or that. And it's really ticked me off. But now, I mean, I was mad at first, but now this is like life or death, because there was a story about a man, 81-year-old man got the phone call. And you got the story for us, Christina?
Yes. So it's such a heartbreaking story, Johnny. An 81-year-old man from Ohio, he was just charged with murder after he allegedly shot and killed a female Uber driver that came to his house. Investigators discovered that the shooter had earlier received a scam call, and they were saying, we have one of your incarcerated relatives, and it involved death threats and demands for money. So the same scammers called Uber, or they downloaded the Uber app, had a driver come to pick up a package from this man's residence. So the driver was not aware that this man had been threatened or anything like that. So this poor woman driver showed up with no idea, unfortunately was shot over this.
Yeah, this is one of those terrible things, because we're seeing a huge uptick. We have, since really the internet's been a thing, that people are scamming, and particularly scamming the poor, the marginalized, the vulnerable, the elderly, for example. This man's 81 years old, William Brock, and he thought a relative was being threatened, and he also thought, ostensibly, that this Uber driver was coming over to pick up, a package of money. They was part of the extortion. So he goes out there, it seems, and then he takes her phone. He holds a gun to her. She doesn't know what's going on. They're kind of piecing this together through dash cam evidence. But he shot her, and there was a little bit of a struggle. He shot her again, multiple times, and all of this, I mean, is whether he should have shot her or not. Probably he should have thought it through more. But he may have genuinely thought he and his family's life were in danger. And these is because greedy people are trying to take advantage.
Yeah, the scammers are at fault. They should be charged with murder.
They should.
Yeah, and we were seeing this. There were a couple of Nigerians that were blackmailing a high school boy, a teenage boy, and he ended up taking his own life and they said go ahead and do it, but they're trying to get money out of him. And this was but they're being extradited here to stand trial.
Wow, that's in another story.
Yeah, and so the point is, these kinds of scams are destroying people's lives. We need to educate our people better about them. But this is just unfortunate, and this is why the book of Proverbs tells us that, we need to be careful. We need to use wisdom, and that the people that do these things, these tricksters, these defrauders, these extortionists, they'll pay a price ultimately. God bless everybody that was harmed in this. Who knows what will happen next, John?
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, just the way you explain that story, it's heartbreaking for everybody.
It really is.
The guy literally was scam called and threatened. And then the same scammers ordered a Uber to pick up a package from this guy, and that guy shot her.
The scary thing is when you don't know what's real, when you don't know where you can get the correct information from, you don't know what reality is. And it's tough.
So this man, elderly man, thinks that she's in cahoots with these thieves, and she's coming to get the ransom. So he's thinking, I'm going to stop her. He demanded to know who her accomplices were, but he ends up shooting her. This is just a horrendous tragedy.
Yeah.
Man, well, listen, we got to see what happens, because he could claim self-defense.
That'll be harder depending on the state that you're in. He's in Ohio. He would have to feel like his life is in imminent danger. But then again, these scammers threatened him and his family. And so maybe he had that in his mind. Just, every individual is different.
Well, we gotta, in the chat room, someone's saying an eye for an eye makes the world blind.
Ooh.
What,
Yeah.
Is that a great saying?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it is. And this would be more like a Jesus saying, because he says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, and he tells us to love our enemies, because this sets Christianity apart. Where this is grace. It's not just that anyone can love someone who loves them back, but how hard is it to love the person who hates you?
It's hard. But
real.
imagine the two stories that we just spoke about. Imagine if that was the air. It's like, I'm going to love my enemy. What would this world look like if we all did that?
And had faith right when it's going down, like Christina. She got weapons that we don't even know about.
I'm also not very mighty, and I'm not a good fighter, so Jesus help me.
Well, in the end of the day, this world is pretty lost. As we move on to our next story here at Art of Heaven News Talk, there is 2 articles that came out in the same day.
Speaking of trust issues that I have.
Now, okay, one story came out from NBC, and the headline said, melting polar ice is slowing the Earth's rotation with possible consequences for timekeeping.
Okay, so the Earth is slowing down. Great, I know what's going on.
Serious. Then you flip the article, scroll a little bit farther. CBS puts out an article where the headline was, Earth is spinning faster than it used to. Clocks might have to skip a second to keep up.
Yeah, they don't know whether they're coming or going. The interesting thing is since 2020, most of the data has said since 2020, the Earth has actually accelerated the rotation a bit. And some of them have said that's because of rising water levels. Now, you're getting the opposite in this article. So it's just one of these things where, speaking of water, we call it flooding. The internet is flooded with contrary information. And sometimes that's a strategy, because what happens is the average person receives all these contrary bits of information. They kind of throw up their hands and they're like, they don't know what to believe, whether to believe anything at all, or they'll just jump onto something because they have to believe something.
Yeah, then it creates like this division between people. Maybe, my theory is, maybe the Earth is slowing down and speeding up at the same time. So basically, it evens itself out and it's the same. How about that?
Yeah, maybe it's some kind of weird balancing
I should
act.
publish that.
Yeah, I don't know how that will go for you, Christina. But the point is that you're going to get conflicting information. What do you do with it? And this is really coming down to truth again. What can we trust? You talk about trust issues. Well, yeah.
No
wonder why people are skeptical about almost any news these days.
Seriously, the world's speeding up, the world's slowing down. I don't know, it's just going to make me dizzy. I'm not going to think too much about it. But there is something happening this month. Nathan, can you break this down?
Yeah, well, it's called cicada-geddon. We've got 2 types of cicadas that are kind of trillions of them, really. I think it's about, some estimate 1.5 million per acre.
Yuck.
That are emerging from the ground. When the soil reaches about 64 degrees, these critters crawl out from the earth and they emerge, and then they go to eating. Now, don't worry, cicada-geddon may sound apocalyptic, but actually, cicadas are kosher. You can eat them. And they actually do contribute, at least in our country, to good things in the environment. Lots of animals eat them, but they are kind of annoying. I mean, like in most species, the guys are trying to show off for the girls, so they make a lot of noise. It's about the same decibel level as a lawnmower. So
that's why they're doing it.
Oh, they're showing off. They're trying to get a mate. Very loud about this kind of thing. And anyway, so every 13 years and every 17 years, depending on the hive, they will emerge. What's strange is we haven't seen this since the 1800s. Both of these hives are emerging at the same time.
No.
Many of them will be concentrated in Illinois and some in like Georgia, the southeast. But I wouldn't worry about it. This is not apocalyptic, at least in my view. And if you have an adventurous taste bud, maybe you can eat some of these kosher critters.
So
No.
are they locusts?
Yeah, you could say that. They are, some people say cicadas, some say locusts. Now, locusts could also refer to grasshoppers of different kinds. So the terms are a little bit arbitrary depending on where you are. But when I was a kid, I used to love to find their exoskeletons hanging on the trees, and they would stick almost like Velcro, and I'd stick them to my sisters. We could collect them everywhere. And
This explains a lot.
it does explain a lot. Yeah. So it's, for me, cicadas are interesting. They're just really noisy, especially when they're trying to attract people.
Everyone knows that sound, you know, the summertime. You know what summer? Let's all do it together. It's the shh. Feel like it's a summer night right now.
Well, listen, I got some good news in the world. Let's check it out.
Is there any good in the world?
We are seeing some
Good in the world.
Okay, they found a man speaking this language that was thought to be extinct since 1815.
Woo.
Right? This Argentinian man, 89 years old, was found speaking the language. And they thought it was extinct for over 200 years.
Wow.
Is this wild? Now, how did this story come about? He just simply said, I exist, I am here. And he kicked off a new mission to preserve and resurrect the Chana language. And I don't know, I think it's fascinating, keeping stuff alive, keeping the family history alive.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a shame when languages actually die out, and I'm not even sure if it's Chana or Chana. Hey, it's so obscure. Even me, I'm a kind of a language guy. I don't know it, but what an interesting thing that you can preserve a culture because language carries culture. And I just think it's a neat thing that it doesn't become extinct, and this guy has worked hard to keep it alive.
If you stay with the theme of Scripture, you can go back to Israel because that was prophesied that the language would be restored. Sure enough, in the late 1800s, the Hebrew language was restored after thousands of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
We could talk about Israel the whole half hour here at Art of Heaven News Talk, for sure. Even one last note, wasn't a bill passed to send funding to Israel,
yeah,
Taiwan.
It's on the floor of the Congress, I think, next day or two or so. They're breaking it out into packages for Taiwan, for China, Ukraine, and then Israel.
We're going to have to fill you in next week here at Art of Heaven News Talk.
Hopefully we'll have a vote by then.
Yeah, and in the meantime, instead of Chana, I'll be speaking cicada for the next several months. Yeah.
We have an expert cicada translation right here.
I can translate.
Art of Heaven News Talk. I'm your host, Johnny Brummett. I'm here with Mark Russick, Christina Orlando, and Nathan Gasway. You're listening to Art of Heaven News Talk.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.